This is not getting discussed on the mainstream media. Not only are they wrong legally, but the fact that they would do this is outrageous. This is an overreaction and really nonsense. How would you react if this was your son or your daughter? It's the offense of knowing the truth. It's the offense of having an alternate worldview. Saying God bless you to someone is not a violation of the law.
Welcome to this very special broadcast, everyone. We're coming to you from the studios of our Oxford Center for the Study of Law and Public Policy. That is the center, by the way, at Oxford that we developed the papers that ultimately became the book Rise of ISIS, A Threat We Can't Ignore, now available in bookstores everywhere. Already, by the way, on the New York Times bestseller list for ebooks. In fact, the very first week it was out, it was on both the ebook list and the ebook and print list, and we didn't even have a print list, print book out yet. So now it is out on paperback, literally around the country. We're encouraging you to buy multiple copies. We want to make sure it gets on the paperback New York Times bestsellers list. Again, Rise of ISIS, A Threat We Can't Ignore. We've gone through a couple of the chapters here, but I wanted to go to the third chapter because I think it's important to understand the nature of the conflict that we're in. We call ISIS in chapter 3 the world's most ruthless and powerful jihadist army. David, you served in Iraq. You have faced jihadist army. That's a bold statement we're making. Let's back this up now with the evidence.
Absolutely. What happened last summer is ISIS crossed the border into Iraq and then immediately routed two full divisions, according to some reports, two full divisions of Iraqi army troops that were equipped with American weaponry. They immediately captured all of that weaponry, which included up-armored Humvees, which included artillery, which included even tanks. So all of a sudden, ISIS went from a conventionally armed jihadist army to a jihadist army armed with some of the most advanced weaponry in the world.
Skip, does that make ISIS different than Al-Qaeda?
It does make ISIS different from Al-Qaeda, although Al-Qaeda used some sophisticated items in their fight. They had nothing like a traditional army. We have now an army in the Islamic State, this ISIS army, that has the traditional equipment. You know, the United States equipment is among the best equipment in the world. The tanks are the best in the world. This is a group that has worldwide ambitions and is now gaining the ability to carry out those ambitions.
Jordan, in our upcoming program at Oxford, we're at the Oxford Center for Study of Law and Public Policy studio here, but when we're back at Oxford, we're going to be talking about Turkey. Turkey's a NATO member, yet so far has really done little, if anything. In fact, there are some reports that Turkey may be actually moving the oil that ISIS now controls on the black market.
Well, we know that ISIS is using Turkey to move that oil. That's how they're able to at least take in a minimum of $1 million a day. And some estimate their budget at upwards of the millions, maybe even $6 million on a good day. And this is before the airstrikes began, when they were really doing as they pleased. But the oil source, I mean, that's again, a significant part of their budget. It's a long-established black market in Turkey, and they're able to use these small amounts. You know, I mean, we're talking about $1 million worth of oil. It's a large amount for a terror organization. It's not a large amount when you're talking about the worldwide oil trade and that black market. So Turkey being somewhat complicit in that. They've even, said in these reports that when it comes to oil prices in these places, it may be that you're taking and even supporting your enemy, but because it brings the price down so significantly, it's worth doing that.
Well, we've got a lot more ahead to cover. We're talking about our book, The Rise of ISIS, A Threat We Can't Ignore. This is a very special broadcast from our studios here at the Oxford Center for the Study of Law and Public Policy. That's where these papers originated that became the book. The book is really a must-read. It's a New York Times bestseller. We want to make sure you have access to it. So it's available now in bookstores around the country in paperback, and we're encouraging you to acquire multiple copies. Of course, you can order it at Amazon, Barnes & Noble as well, or wherever, literally, wherever books are sold, they should have Rise of ISIS. And get copies for your friends as well. Very readable, but very real. Tells you who ISIS is, what the threats are, their links to Hamas, and what we can do to stop it. So we're going to talk more about that. And one of the things we can do is, number one, secure our own borders, so that these reports of ISIS agents coming into the United States, that can be eliminated. How do we eliminate that threat? We get congressional action. We've got a petition up right now. I want to encourage you to sign it at aclj.org, or you could call us at 1-877-989-2255. It's aclj.org or 1-877-989-2255 to sign that petition. Also, the book is called Rise of ISIS, and let me encourage you, get copies for your friends. Study this book so you understand the nature of the threat and the impact it can have. We've got a lot more ahead. Stay tuned.
ISIS, the Islamic State, has sworn it will kill Americans. And now there are credible reports that this radical jihadist group is entering the United States through our porous border with Mexico. By some accounts, there are up to 40 ISIS terrorists in this country already. It's time for our country to mobilize, time for the President and Congress to take this threat seriously, to protect our borders, protect our homeland. That's why the American Center for Law and Justice is taking action. We're engaging this critical threat, putting pressure on the President and Congress to guard America's borders and protect this nation. Sign on to our new petition now. We have no excuse. We know our enemy wants to infiltrate our nation, and we must take action right now. Call 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255, or add your name online, aclj.org.
Welcome back to the broadcast, everyone. We're coming to you from our studios here at the Oxford Center for the Study of Law and Public Policy, which, by the way, very first publication for our Oxford Center is The Rise of ISIS, the Threat We Can't Ignore. In fact, the logo of the Oxford Center that you see up here was actually right on the back of the book. Books published by Simon Schuster, available everywhere, and we're encouraging you to buy multiple copies and get it to your friends. It's out right now. We're talking about ISIS and the threat. Let me read to you from page 40 of the book. This was a statement by the Caliph Ibrahim. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi is his war name, if you will. So to arms, soldiers of Islam, fight, fight. Rush, O Muslims, to your state. It is your state. Syria is not for Syrians, and Iraq is not for Iraqis. The land is for the Muslims, all Muslims. This is my advice to you. If you hold to it, you will conquer Rome and own the world, if Allah wills. So the idea here is a global conquest.
Oh, absolutely. They control territory that's the size of the state. And you know, when you listen to that, he's trying to rewind the clock to the glory days of the Islamic Caliphate, when Rome and the Roman Empire was considered to be their primary opposition. So he has ambitions, as you said, that are absolutely global. And when he talks like that, he's tapping into a deep desire amongst millions of Muslims, particularly young Muslim men, to become part of a new caliphate, a new glory days.
Jordan, when we look at the recruiting efforts, we talked about this in the earlier broadcast, we look at the recruiting efforts, you see the beheadings, we're horrified, they're using it as a recruiting effort, and the question is right now, what's the sense in Washington on the nature of this threat?
That it's a significant threat. We are engaged in the same fight that we were engaged in over a decade ago, even before the 9/11 attacks. There was a fight on this growing threat of radical Islam to the United States homeland, and it's continuing today.
Let me read you again from the book. Grandiose threats are nothing new in the jihadist world, but what makes ISIS especially dangerous is its possession of both the means and will to carry out its threats. It is the best equipped, richest terrorist force in the world. And one of the targets of this group clearly has been Christians. The Christian persecution that has gone on has been outrageous. They're marking the homes of Christians with a symbol that stands for Nazarene. I had the opportunity to speak with the vicar of Baghdad, Andrew White, who was serving the church in Baghdad, an Episcopal priest that was serving in Baghdad. And it was just horrific. In fact, I want to play 2 minutes from that interview that we did in Jerusalem. He was out of Iraq and in Jerusalem. That's the only way we could do the interview. Take a listen. When you are ministering to your congregants, to the people in your church, to these Christians, and I want those that are watching this in the West to understand the scope and nature. You're talking about an ancient Christian people that have been in this region since the beginning of Christendom, and it's been completely wiped out by this ISIS group. And you've been ministering to these people in Baghdad. I have to ask you this question, and Canon White, I know this is tough, and Andrew, we've been friends a long time. It's your people in your church that are being killed. How are you dealing with this? How are you dealing with this? How are you explaining this to the other believers in the community?
To have your people murdered in front of you, to have the people you love slaughtered, is so terrible. There is no easy answer or easy solution, and yet we know these people who are our enemies, we are called still to love them. And my people say to me, they call me Daddy or Abuna. They say, Daddy, Has the rest of the world forgotten about us? Do they not know what's happening to us? And I say to them, no, my darlings, they are with us. Our brothers and sisters in the West, you might not be experiencing this torture that we are experiencing, but we are your brothers and sisters. We are your family. And we need your help. We need your support. We can't do this on our own. The job is so huge, just getting food and cradles and blankets for people. But with you, we can do it.
ISIS, the Islamic State, has sworn it will kill Americans. And now there are credible reports that this radical jihadist group is entering the United States through our porous border with Mexico. By some accounts, there are up to 40 ISIS terrorists in this country already. It's time for our country to mobilize, time for the President and Congress to take this threat seriously, to protect our borders, protect our homeland. That's why the American Center for Law and Justice is taking action. We're engaging this critical threat, putting pressure on the President and Congress to guard America's borders and protect this nation. Sign on to our new petition now. We have no excuse. We know our enemy wants to infiltrate our nation, and we must take action right now. Call 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255, or add your name online, aclj.org.
In the chapters that follow, you will first learn about ISIS, where it came from, its goals, and its capabilities. Then you will learn the same about Hamas, as well as the history of its war against Israel. You will learn about the law of war and war crimes, including who is guilty and who is innocent. You will hear stories about the incredible bravery of men and women in uniform who have confronted the horrors of jihad and laid down their lives to protect the innocent. Finally, you'll learn what you can do and what our nation can do to stop an emerging genocide, defeat jihad, and protect Israel. This book is not long, but you'll notice that it is full of footnotes to our sources. In other words, we've done our homework. When you read, you'll be equipped to raise this issue at home, on social media, in our communities, and when you speak or write to your elected representatives. Ignorance is the enemy not just of our democracy, but also of our moral integrity as a nation, as the land of the free and home of the brave. Read this book and you will be informed.
Welcome back to the broadcast. So we know that ISIS is focusing in on Christians. That's been Christians and Muslims that disagree with them. But they've really gone after the Christian community, and the brutality has been incredible. But now let's turn our attention to Hamas. And let me read you something. Again, this is found in our book. This is actually page 43 of Rise of ISIS. This is not information you're going to get anyplace else. We really encourage you to get this book and study it. You become the expert on a topic. We may be looking at the 30-year war here. I mean, this could go on it's intergenerational. So we have got to be understanding who we're fighting. We have to understand the nature of the enemy. So now let's talk about Hamas. They have the same goal, which is domination, the creation of a Sharia state, an Islamic state. But here's their goal, where Hamas is focusing on Jews, ISIS was focusing on Christians and other Muslims. Here's Hamas from their charter, page 43 of our book. Our battle with the Jews is long and dangerous, requiring all dedicated efforts. It's a phase which must be followed by succeeding phases, a battalion which must be supported by battalion after battalion of the divided Arab and Islamic world until the enemy is overcome and the victory of Allah descends. So David, Hamas in its sights, again, is the creation of the Islamic State, but it is the elimination of Jews. It's not just the elimination of Israel. It's much broader than that. But clearly, Israel and Jews are the primary target of Hamas, while ISIS is focusing on Muslims that disagree, Yazidis, other religious minorities, and especially Christians.
Absolutely. Hamas wants to make, right now its goal is to make life in Israel so intolerable through terrorist attacks, raining missiles down on the civilian population, that the Jewish population of Israel grows disheartened. And if they ever got the kind of military power that ISIS has, they would spring out of Gaza, they would launch out of Gaza and try to attack and kill as many Jews as they possibly could. The only thing right now that is keeping the Jews of Israel from facing the same fate of the Christians of Iraq is the might of the Israel Defense Forces.
Jordan, let me throw this one to you here with Hamas, because you've been studying this for a long time and you've experienced it firsthand. Their tactic is to get into the community so that you cannot tell the difference. We talked about the law of war violations here between the civilians and the populace and the actual terrorist fighters. But there are reports that there may be upwards of 30,000 Hamas fighters, if you will, troops, available right now today in the West Bank and Gaza.
That's right. And so the idea here that you've got the numbers ready to rise up when they feel like it's best for them. And so right now they're engaged in, listen, if those fighters want to rise up and try to fight Israel, that would be unsuccessful. Could they cause serious damage? Yes, but it's not going to work out for them in the long run. They know that, so instead what they try to do is weaken Israel by gaining international support, by giving fodder to the anti-Israel world at the United Nations and that community at the UN, which is unfortunately a growing community, the anti-Israel world. And so they're playing their part in what is ultimately this idea that we will take back our Holy Land, and that's how they see it, and then ultimately spread this throughout the world, as we've talked about on this broadcast.
All right, the book is Rise of ISIS, A Threat We Can't Ignore. It's available in bookstores everywhere. We want to see this book on the New York Times bestsellers list for paperback. That's where you come in. You got it there on the ebook. We were number 3, which was incredible. A huge thank you. Couldn't have done it without you. You'll also receive the song Where I Stand, which we're going to hear another version of a little bit later in the broadcast with our friend Ricky Skaggs. You're not going to want to miss that. Again, the book is Rise of ISIS, A Threat We Can't Ignore. We encourage you to buy multiple copies, available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever books are sold. Order it now. We encourage you to do that. Also, we've got a petition up. We've got to secure our own borders here in the United States from this threat. Join us in this petition. We need legislative action. ACLJ.org or 1-877-989-2255 to sign on to that petition. ACLJ.org. That's ACLJ.org or 1-877-989-2255. We'll be back with more in just a moment.
ISIS, the Islamic State, has sworn it will kill Americans. And now there are credible reports that this radical jihadist group is entering the United States through our porous border with Mexico. By some accounts, there are up to 40 ISIS terrorists in this country already. It's time for our country to mobilize, time for the President and Congress to take this threat seriously, to protect our borders, protect our homeland. That's why the American Center for Law and Justice is taking action. We're engaging this critical threat, putting pressure on the President and Congress to guard America's borders and protect this nation. Sign on to our new petition now. We have no excuse. We know our enemy wants to infiltrate our nation, and we must take action right now. Call 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255, or add your name online, aclj.org.
Welcome back to the broadcast, everyone. We're talking about the rise of ISIS, the interconnection between ISIS and Hamas. And we're also talking about our brand new book, Rise of ISIS, A Threat We Can't Ignore, available in bookstores everywhere. We encourage you, as we've been saying, to get it and get multiple copies. I'm reading you something from the book. Hamas does not want peace with Israel. It will not negotiate a permanent peace agreement with Israel. Instead, it will only agree to intermittent truces when its military capabilities have been so degraded that it needs time to recuperate and rearm. And the reality is, David, we just saw that take place in this conflict this summer. This is what they ran out of ammunition. That's when the battle stopped.
Exactly. I mean, that's their strategy from the beginning, is they will fight. If they get beaten back by Israel, they will appeal to the international community for refuge. They'll use that time of refuge to get more weapons, to train more fighters, and then they fight again. This is what they're going to do until either they're destroyed or Israel gives up. So that's why this fight never seems to end. It's because they are dedicated to fighting until Israel is destroyed.
Let me read something from the Hamas Charter. Again, page 46 of our book, Rise of ISIS. This is Article 5 and 8 Allah is its goal, the Prophet is its model to be followed, the Quran its constitution, jihad its way, and death for the sake of Allah its loftiest desire. And despite their protests to the contrary, Skip, the charter also says Israel will exist and will continue to exist until Islam abolishes it. So if there's any question to anybody that these jihadists share the same goal, it says Israel will exist and continue to exist until Islam abolishes it. And they're unequivocal about that, Skip.
That's exactly right. This is a religiously motivated group, Hamas. It's an outgrowth of the Muslim Brotherhood. And the Muslim Brotherhood was a group that sought to return to the glory days of Islam. And they thought that one of the ways to do that was to create this caliphate. So we have this situation where Hamas is religiously motivated. They view the Jews as being interlopers and less because they're not from Islam, and therefore they have not only a moral obligation, they have a religious obligation to Allah to destroy the Jews and to retake all of the territory occupied by Israel. So this is a religiously motivated group. They're a group that believes that martyrdom is the only way you're sure to have salvation with God and acceptance with God, and therefore they motivate people to go out and to commit these crimes. And at the same time, they don't value life. They talk over and over again in this movement that you value life, we value death, and therefore they think they have an advantage because they will lay down their lives and they will kill anyone to achieve their goals. And that's why it seems to me that the West is really naive or intentionally blind when they sit there and they try to force Israel to negotiate with a group whose very purpose is to destroy the people they're negotiating with, and they do not compromise.
You know, it's interesting also, Jordan, is that Hamas is now partners with the Palestinian Authority, even though in their charter they challenged and chastised, this is Hamas, the PLO as being too moderate, too much negotiations, too much what they called accommodation. But now we have a situation where the United States is giving money, and we talk about this in the book, when the United States is giving money to the Palestinian Authority, and the partner in the Palestinian Authority government is Hamas.
Yeah, that's right. And so we've got these situations again where the U.S., it just seems like we're fueling the enemy. We should be giving a dime to these groups ultimately. That's the truth. But we are. We have to face the reality that we are. And so what do we do about it? We talk about in the book the idea that you're not going to be able to stop these groups like ISIS. You're not going to be able to stop Hamas if we ourselves are providing them funding.
So what we want you to do is two things. One is the book is called Rise of ISIS, A Threat We Can't Ignore. I encourage you to get the book. It's available in bookstores everywhere. You can order it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Walmart. Everybody's carrying it. But you can order it today. We encourage you to do it. Rise of ISIS, A Threat We Can't Ignore. And we really encourage you to buy multiple copies of it as well. We're talking about the issue also of securing our own borders here. That's important. That's part of the overall plan, crushing the enemy. We're going to get into that. But let me tell you this, folks, right now. We had our good friend Ricky Skaggs, bluegrass legend, came in and we did an acoustic version of the song Where I Stand. It's a tribute to the Christians in Iraq and in Syria that have been persecuted. And this is with our good friend Ricky Skaggs sitting in playing mandolin. I want to bring it to you right now.
Begin to comprehend, awaken fear just to think how far some people will descend. And what is now has been before, over and over it's been ignored. It is a heart, whatever soul, that slaughters innocence, the end becomes the means. Twisted faith to justify a violent mean. Guided by lies that deceive, nothing the eye should ever see. Now my heart is crying, deep beneath the voices lying. I can't stand to see this evil. Can't stand to see this evil anymore. can't pretend it's just not real. The time is now, we must be strong and not allow it to prevail. Father in heaven, hear our prayer. Strengthen your souls washed in despair. Now my heart is crying, deep beneath the voices lying. I can't stand to see this evil anymore. And while the world is sleeping, we're condemned for just believing. I can't stand to see this evil anymore. And are we blind to all of these in an effort to appease this restless feeling of unease? Now my heart is crying, deep beneath the voices lying. I can't stand to see this evil anymore. And while the world is sleeping, we're condemned for just believing. I can't stand to see this evil anymore. No, I can't stand this evil anymore. Anymore.
Well, that's going to do it for the broadcast today. Again, when you get the book, Rise of ISIS, you're going to get the song, Where I Stand as well. There'll be a link right in the back of the book, actually. You get to page at the end of the book under acknowledgement. It'll give you the download information on where you can get the song when you buy the book. Where I Stand is part of the package of Rise of ISIS, A Threat We Can Ignore. We encourage you to get that at bookstores everywhere. And again, let me say a couple of things. Number one, sign that petition to secure our own borders here at aclj.org or 1-877-989-2255. That's aclj.org or 877-989-2255. A huge thank you to our entire listening and viewing audience that have made already Rise of ISIS a bestseller on ebooks. We want to do the same thing on paperback, and we appreciate your efforts there. Appreciate your support of this effort from our Oxford Center for the Study of Law and Public Policy. That's going to do it for the broadcast this week. We will talk to you next week.